Hamilton. Hi everybody, Arnold Hamilton here, editor of The Observer at our offices in Oklahoma City, along with our longtime correspondent in Tulsa, Richard Fricker. Richard, how you doing today? Good to see you. Coffee's hot on a cold day.
We've got cold outside. We've got snow on the ground. It's warm inside.
And just over, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And we're preparing for Christmas.
Yep.
And a happy holiday.
Indeed. In fact, we're just slightly over 2 weeks. Our white Christmas came early this year, obviously. So a crazy time, and we can't seem to get above the freezing mark these days. But
I kind of wonder, is it a white Christmas we have, or is it a white solstice?
Well,
because the solstice comes before Christmas.
Well, there you go. You know, it is the season of Advent, and we thought today might be a good day to visit a little bit about we could have a real religious theme, I think, today. We have the war on Christmas going.
Yeah.
We have the Satanists offering to put a monument up to compliment the Ten Commandments on the state capitol, the monument.
Smell the sulfur now.
And we have the most unusual endorsement, I would say, for the idea of a chapel, the House Speaker's idea for a chapel in the state capitol that we can talk about too. But let's talk a little bit about the war on the so-called war on Christmas. I think I need to qualify that a little bit. It's amazing that this is something that simply will not die.
Well, anyone who's looked at our blog this morning knows that I've got a piece up on that very subject. And one of the things that occurred to me was I remember people lamenting that the commercialization of Christmas was what was diluting the true meaning of it, etc. And now, of course, with the Koch brothers, the Waltons, and the Tea Party, commercialism is in, spirituality is out. But somehow, if you're not, I guess I have to go to Target and spend more money in order to be a good Christian, observing, I put Christ back in Christmas by spending money at Target or Lowe's, or Home Depot was a big contributor to the ultra-conservative cause. And it's just absolutely silly. And what I said in the piece, and I really urge people to read it, I cite several instances of people who are taking the whole spirit of Christianity, or the whole spirit of the season, if you will, and they're really doing something about it. And it's not going to a parade and watching Levi little majorettes kick their frozen bare legs up in the air for the hometown car dealer. And it's not about Jim Inhofe leaning off his horse and patting little kids on the head while eyeing the crowd to see who's watching and going to vote for him.
Well, and of course you mentioned Jim Inhofe, but our state legislators are getting in the act here too. We have our legislator Bobby Cleveland from Slaughterville and a freshman representative from Tulsa, both of whom say they're now going to introduce legislation that makes it safe for our school teachers to utter the phrase "Merry Christmas" to a child in their classroom without fear of being sued.
Now, does anyone anywhere in the state of Oklahoma know of a case at all, anywhere, anytime, where a school teacher was sued for saying Merry Christmas? That's right up there with Sharia law. The threat never existed. It's a making up an issue, which is, let's go back, we want to talk about Christmas, let's go back to Roman times, what they called bread and circus. Give the crowd bread, give them circus, and they won't pay attention to what the other things you're doing to them. And that's what this is. It's bread and circus.
But it's just phenomenal to me that this sort of stuff continues to go on and flourish when we have serious problems in this state that the legislature needs to be dealing with. And instead, we have a group that seems insistent upon majoring on the minors, yet they seem to think that, the world hinges on them being able to pass a law that allows a teacher to say Merry Christmas, as if none are able to say that at this point without being in fear of being hauled to the courthouse. It's utter sheer craziness.
Well, not only that, I feel with a great deal of certainty, having covered the courts for 40 years plus, a lawsuit like that, if one were to exist, would quite frankly have the longevity of a snowball's chance in hell, if you want to be religious about it.
But this stuff does stir up a certain segment of the electorate that's important in the Republican primary these days.
Right.
A group of people that are motivated. They are convinced that there's some sort of anti-Christian evil onslaught taking over that is destroying our country. That was, of course, in their view, in revisionist history, a Christian nation. And, I guess it's good politics in Oklahoma these days, but when did people decide to, or perhaps they always have, maybe this segment has not really grown, maybe this segment's just always been there, but when did they check their brains at the door and not think these things through on whether or not they're just simply being played?
I think it is probably a couple of things, but I want to get in the game. I want to fight the liberals. I want to be a soldier in the trenches, and they're not even near the trenches. The fellow I cited in my piece this morning, Josh Martin, and his friends that run the car care clinic where they give free auto repair to indigents and people that are going to these minimum wage jobs because it's the only job they can get, making sure they have transportation. They're in the trenches. They're getting their hands dirty. They're for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a year. They donate every other Saturday. That, I think, is the teaching these people are claiming to be defending when they're not defending it at all.
Exactly. Well, it's interesting, too, that in this season of Advent, that the Satanist temple in New York City has offered at their expense to erect a monument to Satan on the Capitol grounds to, as they put it, complement the Ten Commandments monument. And of course, it wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when we were going to see something like this. And I think that, these folks who are convinced that there's a war on Christmas and who believe that somehow we're stamping our Christian heritage out of the public square, have now opened up Pandora's box, and here we are in a situation where it's going to be awfully hard to tell the Satanists that they can't put a monument up there.
Well, this falls under the old adage, careful what you pray for, you just might get it. Because I think a legitimate argument can be made, since you did this Ten Commandment business, which I would also address, go back into the archives and of the Observer, Fricker, Ten Commandments, you'll see our original piece on this a few years ago. And as we were talking, considering the Scottish, Irish, Welsh, English heritage of many people in Oklahoma, if they decide, well, I do have a Celtic heritage, and if I have a Celtic heritage, that means I have somewhat of a Druid heritage. I want an oak tree, and I want a really big one. And we have our Native American brethren to think about, as well as our...
Well, we're worried about that being on the car license plates, don't forget.
Yeah. Then we've got our brothers and sisters of the Hebrew persuasion. We have people that are Hindu, Muslim, and you said that the Muslims think that the chapel at the Capitol might not be a bad idea.
Well, that's exactly right. The House Speaker wants to spend some money to build a chapel inside the state Capitol building, and he is receiving support from what many people might consider an unlikely source. The local head of the state director of the Council on American Islamic Relations says he thinks that would be a fine idea, and it would be a marvelous place for those of the Muslim faith to gather for daily prayers. And I suspect that that's not exactly what Speaker Shannon and people of that ilk had in mind when they suggested a chapel.
Far and away not what they had in mind. But I don't see a problem with it. I really do not. As we've this has been mentioned several times in writing and in these interviews. I'm Roman Catholic. Sure, go ahead. And maybe we'll have a little Roman Catholic dialogue there in the chapel, which I'm sure evangelicals will be more than welcome to attend, as they are in any Catholic church in America, or the world for that matter. That this also leads to who's going to book all these events and who takes precedent. In other words, Muslims say their prayers several times a day. Catholics have various high holy days and feast days, as do those in Judaism. Hindus, I know they have various days of importance. So who's going to book all this as to who gets the chapel when and where? I'm sure Speaker Shannon will be glad to appoint someone at a very nice salary to do all this for us.
Well, Richard, as a lifelong Baptist and one who continues to practice my faith regularly, and it's important to me, I certainly think the Ten Commandments, for example, are important rules to live by, and they're a great outline for our lives. But I've often thought, in terms of being on the state capitol ground or on public property in a sectarian society like ours, that unless you could demonstrate to me that suddenly that was going to make a huge difference in the ethics of what's taking place inside the Capitol building, then you're really creating a whole lot more problems, and unnecessary problems that are diverting attention. Again, we're back to bread and circus, I think, from the really important issues that face the state of Oklahoma heading into 2014.
Well, I always wondered with Mike Ritchie, the Republican rep from Broken Arrow, John Birch, Tea Party, and all that. Anyone who's been around the Capitol, there's vacant space around there. Why did they say, let's rent this as a reflection room for legislators? Why does it have to be the Ten Commandment obelisk on the state Capitol lawn? If it was to give solace to the members of the legislature or various state bodies, couldn't they have found a place near the Capitol where people could maybe walk over to in their lunch hour and sit down and ponder slightly? I don't think anybody's going to be hanging out at the obelisk of the Ten Commandments in this weather. If they want to have a chapel, they can have it off ground somewhere. The Oklahoma Bar Association offices aren't too far away. Maybe they'd like to donate a little room for legislators. They can go in and ponder law and their faith at the same time.
Well, the House every week has a Bible study luncheon in one of the committee rooms at the state capitol. Right. There's plenty of space already in the Capitol. I don't know of anybody who would be denied the right to get down on their knees in their office and pray, or to in a committee room or what have you like that. It just seems to me there are plenty of nooks and crannies without having to create an issue like this. And again,
I'm reminded of the story, and I heard it firsthand from the Senator John Young of Sapulpa.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time when the various legislators would bring someone from the community to lead the opening invocation. And I cannot remember what the legislation was, but they were seriously deadlocked. And it was an important piece of legislation. They need to get it herded out the Senate door and over to the House or something like that. And he had taken his son, young John, and without prompting, the young boy, who was in elementary school at the time, I believe, he was giving this invocation. He said something like, "And God help us get through this legislation."
Exactly. Well, and I'm reminded, and lest people think that we're picking on the Republicans on this, and obviously the Republicans dominate the legislature, have the vast majorities in both the House and Senate today, so they're driving the agenda on these things. But it wasn't so long ago when the Democrats were in control that the state representative from Del City and the state representative from Big Cabin came to fisticuffs over who was going to get to select the preacher of the day to deliver the prayer from the rostrum. So, I guess with all this going on, Richard, we probably ought to wrap up. And I just want to wish you a Merry Christmas, a little early.
Merry Christmas to you too,
and Happy Holidays.
By the way, the solstice comes before Christmas, and many of the Irish persuasion, that's kind of not a holy day, but it's a day we take note of.
Well, and you ought to, if you haven't seen the latest Observer, folks ought to take a look at our piece entitled Happy Solstice. It's written by a gentleman who is not Christian, but has not declared war on Christmas. It is not offended when people wish him a Merry Christmas. And it's a little sanity, I think, amidst the insanity of this as we head into the holy season here.
Well, as we're headed into the season, it is Merry Christmas, and I will be on the Toys for Tots ride. That's for any of those people who consider me some kind of a heathen. But I know you two have things going on, and we wish everyone well and a joyous season. Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad.
And Happy Solstice. We'll talk to you next week or somewhere down the line. Take care.